This is Mari Robeson of Love Lulu Creative, a podcast that supports and celebrates artists and creative entrepreneurs. This is episode number 44, and I'm super excited because today I have local Central Coast artist Amy McKay on the show. She's also a fellow Cal Poly alumni, and she's so incredibly talented. Not only is she an artist, she's a graphic designer. She does gorgeous murals, and she's an illustrator. Whew. I mean, we talk about a lot of things on the show today. And here's another thing. Um, she's just started this career. She was actually a landscape designer for many, many years, I believe 18 years, until recently she took this leap of faith and decided, oh, why not? I'm going to pursue the life of a full-time artist. And I think that's really powerful, especially right now during this time. If you're at home listening to this podcast, and with this pandemic, a lot of us are rethinking our careers and what that looks like, and maybe we do want to make a shift. And if you've had that little inkling in the back of your mind, this is the episode for you, because not only to quit a very good, stable, flexible, wonderful career to pursue art, where a lot of people have these limiting beliefs that you can't make a living as an artist, is a challenge to many people. But Amy has done it with grace and with ease and with educating herself, and she shares a lot of this helpful advice with us today. So stay tuned for a really wonderful episode with the very talented Amy McKay. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really does help with this mission to support the arts. Hi, Amy. It's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. It's really nice to have a fellow Cal Poly alumni on, and a local artist to get to speak with. I wish we could be doing this in person, but nice to have you.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. I really kind of dug into your Instagram, so I have some fun questions to ask you about your evolution of your creative career as an artist. But one thing I did find is that you didn't really pursue art until later, and so that's super interesting. I'd really like to talk about that. So you went to Cal Poly, but you didn't study art. Can you tell me what you majored in?
Yeah, I studied landscape architecture. And then I worked in that industry for about 19 years. And all the while I was doing artwork, but it was always on the side sort of thing.
Yeah, I actually really can relate to this very much, because I went into the world of interior design instead of, and always did my art on the side. And it wasn't until recently when I really decided to pursue my art straight out, just art.
Yeah.
So we have similar kind of backgrounds, which is kind of interesting. Did you work for an architecture firm, or did you, you did?
Yeah, a local firm here. And yeah, they were a great company to work for. I joke that it's like the breakup line. It's not you, it's me. That's how I felt when I resigned. It was bittersweet. And I mean, I have 2 kids, and they supported my ever-changing schedule, over all of those years, from, when they were babies all up through school. And I did a lot of different creative work for them outside of landscape architecture, which was pretty amazing as well. And my husband works there too. So it's really like my kids grew up in that office, and, it really felt like a family to me. But at some point, a couple years before I resigned, I started to get a bit restless, and it probably took a solid year before I realized, or was able to pinpoint what that was about, because it didn't have anything to do with the work or the people I was working with. And I tried a bunch of different things, adjusting my schedule and backing off on managing projects, and, an assortment of things to kind of try to find the balance or something. I wasn't even sure really what it was I was looking for. And then I don't know, one day it kind of became really clear that I just was done. And I needed to move on and pursue art full time, at least give it a shot, before I was retired, sort of thing. I didn't want to wait until I was 65 and then wonder, well, what if I had had the balls to leave, 20 years ago? What could I have done with an art career in those 20 years?
Well, that's amazing that you like followed the impulse to pursue it. So, uh, okay, I find it really interesting because just like I like to paint room interiors, I see your landscaping in your artwork. Like you paint a lot of really beautiful landscapes, but it's very graphic design oriented. So, did you have some background with that company doing some graphics?
I did, and that was kind of self-taught. I sort of stumbled into it as we were, we did a whole lot of projects that called for graphic design, but we never really had anyone at the company who had any background or skill in it. And I just kind of started looking at some of the graphics we were producing and saying and thinking like this could be better. And so over the years, I kind of became that sort of go-to person for graphics. And then we actually started offering it as a service to our clients, like project branding and signage and, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So that was really great because there was this really fun variety in the work that I was doing.
Okay, that explains that. It's kind of like she's the creative one, give that to her. She'll make that look really good over there. Well, that explains a lot, and that explains why your work is really beautiful, the landscapes. And I want to ask you, when I was on your Instagram, you're doing like a lot of hiking, so you're doing a lot of the trails. I should mention that are you in San Luis Obispo?
I am, yeah.
So we're both on the Central Coast, even though I'm in Rio Grande. But so you're doing a lot of are you doing this hiking as research, and then you're going to come back and paint what you're seeing out in the field, or how's that process, the creative process of that work for you?
Well, I've always been an avid hiker, and it's just something that yeah, it's kind of like church for me, being out in nature.
Mhm.
And I mean, we're so lucky here. Every time I walk out the door to go for a hike, the list of options is just endless, and it's so great. Um, and I don't know, a couple of years ago, I just started thinking about like what those trails mean to me as a local. And as I started talking to other people, friends that I hike with, and just folks that you run into and start chatting with about hiking, is that we kind of all have one thing in common there, and that those we make memories on those trails.
Mhm.
And maybe they're our favorite that we hike every week because it's close to home, or you have friends come to town and visit for the weekend, and the first thing my husband and I think, if it's someone who hasn't been here before, is what trail are we taking them on?
Yeah, we do the same thing.
Yeah. Or like, Bishop Peak is the first trail that my son was able to hike by himself, when he
Mm.
was just little. And, I'll never forget the day that he did it. Um, and so I started creating these hiking posters, these digital illustrations, um, of
Oh, you do those
some of
digitally?
the,
Are they're
yeah,
vector drawings? Oh,
yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the intent with those was to have them be really easily accessible. Instead of having original fine art pieces, I wanted to create something that was, um, didn't take as much time for me to put together, and something that was, at a price point that appealed to a lot of people.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and that's been really fun because every time I sell one of those, I end up chatting to someone about why they chose that particular trail.
Mm.
And I get to hear their stories about you know, that was the first trail they hiked when they moved to town. Or I'll never forget this one woman who bought the Cerro San Luis print from me. And that particular one is taken on a stormy Christmas Eve with the, you know, the tree that the Madonnas put up on the top every year.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that particular trail, she has a photo of her husband and her grandkids up ahead of her on the trail, you know, right before Christmas. And she said it was the last hike that she took with her husband because he died shortly after.
Oh my goodness. Well,
So she's telling me this story, and I'm like, okay, I got to hold it together.
right. Oh my gosh.
But
Wow.
it's so rewarding for me to connect with people
Yeah,
that way.
absolutely. I know you're talking about this. It's making me think of all the things that have happened on trails. And my most unpleasant one was encountering a tarantula hawk
Oh gosh.
on the Johnson Trail. But it actually was a really funny story because my daughter and I, we just ran around it. It was just the craziest thing. I'd never seen anything like that before, and was really glad I didn't know how painful their sting is until I got home.
Ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Exactly. Now I kind of steer clear of the Johnson Trail, though. At a certain time of the year, I don't really go there. But
Okay. Good
that's
to know.
really great. I really like that. Those are really special memories, and I didn't even put it together until you started talking about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many memories, funny things like that, you know.
Yeah. So I have a, you know, long list of trails. I did an initial 6 of those prints, and there's, you know, a long list that I'm really wanting to get to add to the collection. But in terms of the hikes on my Instagram, that was more of just a personal goal. I really wanted to do 100 hikes this year, and I figured if I made it public, it would sort of hold me accountable. And I'm so behind. It's really ridiculous.
Okay, okay. Oh goodness, I'm bouncing all over the place because I have a couple of questions. That I think is really interesting that you did put that there. But there was also something else that you posted on your Instagram, and I'm not really sure about the context of it, but it has to do with your to-do list. So
Oh
instead
yeah,
of a to-do list, you created a done list, which I
yeah.
love that concept because of many reasons why I like that. But it has to do with self-promotion. Was that something that you just came up with, or was that something that you did in a mastermind group with other artists? Because it's really brilliant, and I'd love you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, you know, it was just something I came up with as I was in the first few months of doing this full time, because that was before I really had any work going, and I've never run a business before, and I felt so overwhelmed a lot of the time at all of the things I needed to do, you know,
Mm,
to get all of my business details up and going, and you know how to market myself and how to reach out to other businesses. You know, it just there were many days when I was just sort of be frozen going, well, where do I start? This is overwhelming. And I don't remember how it kind of came about, except that I just at some point a couple months in, I realized, you know what, I've actually done a lot in a couple months.
mhm.
And I just decided to sort of flip that switch. And instead of being consumed with the list of things to do, I thought if I had a place to display a list of all of the things I'd accomplished, even if they were small things, but meant something to me in that forward motion of the business, um, that it would give me that kind of push on those days that I was feeling overwhelmed. I could just glance up at that and go, okay, no, you know, I've come a long way, and it's just step by step. And in another few months, that list is going to grow, and it really helps me kind of, um, you know, stay focused on the present moment, and sort of have faith that things will happen, and that you are making those forward steps. even when it
Yeah, I
feels
think
like it's slow.
yeah, I think that's really a good thing because especially I don't know if this is a woman thing, but we're always no, I think this is a people thing. We're always off to the next thing. It's like we achieve something that we've been really striving for and we did okay, did that. On to the next. And it's like, wait a
Yeah,
second, just savor that for a minute and look back at all the
exactly.
steps that you took that to do that. And it is something as a creative entrepreneur that, you know, we're constantly looking forward motion, but it is nice to have that validation of the past things that you've accomplished. Very nice.
Right. And especially when you're doing something for the first time, I feel like, because there were just little things like another local graphic designer I wanted to reach out to, but it felt intimidating to do that. So that, I mulled that over for months. And when I finally just, made that phone call, I wrote it down because
How'd it go?
it just, well, it was fine. I mean, it was more about reaching out and less about what the outcome was, but just kind of
Mm,
overcoming that fear or worry about how someone was going to perceive me or respond to me. Like it helped me focus on the goals that I had and not what other people are thinking of me, or I don't know if that makes sense, but you can get caught up in like, well, what are they going to think, and I don't have a formal training in this, or the imposter syndrome kind of holding you back from
mhm,
presenting yourself as a professional.
mhm.
Anyway, yeah, that's been good. And then I let that run. It's on a big butcher paper roll
Yeah.
hanging in my studio, and at the end of the year I tear it off and tuck it away and start another one.
So back when I was in college, my art uh, teacher, professor, said to get a black journal. So I've had a black spiral journal since college every year, and some years I do two of them, but I kind of do the same thing but in my journal, and
Yeah.
I do all my kind of forward thinking of what I want to achieve that year, and then kind of check it off as I go along. And it's so fun to look back at those old journals and see
Yeah.
all those things that I did, and really does help in manifesting things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful.
I also really liked, and I wanted to know a little bit more about, you do a hashtag a lot called Meet the Maker. And I think, and self-promotion, I think this is one of the hardest things for artists because we're so in love with the idea of creating that once we create something, it's like, oh, how do we sell this? And how do we show this to anybody? And um, I think every artist I've ever met has had that feeling. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because I saw lots of posts on your Instagram about that, about Meet the Maker.
Yeah, someone else tagged me in that. I guess it's something that um, a creative started on Instagram for March of every year, and she creates this list that gives you a prompt every day for the month of March.
Mm,
So it's March Meet the Maker, and what I liked about it is because I'm pretty terrible at posting regularly. Uh,
right, right.
there are just some days or some weeks when I don't really feel like I have anything that important to say, and I never want to force it just for the sake of
Hmm.
being visible. So this was kind of cool because it it really asked you to think about all of the different aspects of being a creative entrepreneur and what goes into it, and kind of your backstory and behind the scenes, like how to, um, and when I kind of broke it down into these prompts, I realized I had something to post every day, and and that it was information that other people were interested in, which
Hmm.
is sometimes hard for me to believe.
I know. It's funny because it's like such a natural thing for you to be creating and stuff, and they do. People are very fascinated with the process of it. Um,
Yeah, and I think we take for granted that
Right.
what goes into it and how it comes together is interesting to people.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of a fun way to get me to post every day. And then of course I just went back to normal, not
Yeah.
posting very often.
I think that it's that's a good little tip of advice though for someone who wants to pursue an art career, is that to not shy away from talking about your story and the meaning behind why you're doing something, and show the progress photos. And I mean, all of those things are really helpful for people to want to buy into your brand. Really, they buy the person behind the brand. So for them to know more about you and your process, it's super interesting, and it's fun what we do. So
Yeah, I totally agree. I had, when I first got this business going, I was going to this local business gathering once a month. That was really great. It was a mix of all different business owners, business industries, but it was a really open, collaborative discussion about all different issues, but everyone would benefit from it. Um, and anyway, the woman who leads that group, she had some great advice about social media, which I keep in mind a lot, and I've passed it on a few times. Um, she said the 3 points to think about are like, know, and trust.
mhm,
And and the idea behind it is, someone finds your page and they start following you, so that's the like. And then through your content, they get to know who you are as well as what you do. And then the third point is trust. After some time, now they trust that you're an expert at what you do, and that if you know they're thinking about buying something, or like buying a product or buying a service, you're going to be at the top of their minds because they've been following your journey. They feel like they know you as a person, and because of that, they have this trust in what you're doing, that you're a professional, that you're knowledgeable and capable and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it, rather than like, how do I market this product, but
mhm,
more, but instead just how do I share my
mhm,
story, my work, and along the way, your product gets marketed.
mhm.
So maybe it's a little more organic, because yeah, it's really unnatural for most artists, and I'm definitely one of them, to just say, here's my painting, anyone want to buy
Yeah, right.
it?
Exactly, exactly. um yeah, I really like that. That's wonderful advice that she gave. It's very true. And i I also really, I follow a lot of artists obviously too, and I really like when they do all three of those things. But just even just telling their story of a night, there's new followers here and it's nice to meet you, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Like, I think that those are super interesting to read. I actually will read the whole thing. um, Maybe I'm just of a different generation. I know kind of a younger generation is like my kids are like, that's too long to read, TLTR. And it's like, I like reading those things.
It's
But
funny, I do too, but like, I'm fascinated with the artists I follow. I do the same thing. I'm fascinated to know what their backstory is, and some personal things about them too. But I still have a hard time convincing myself that anybody would give a damn about
exactly.
my own stuff. Like,
Right.
surely I'm not as interesting as these other people.
Exactly. I feel the same way. But you know what was really great, Amy? Because I met you through Slow, the Arts Obispo, but I did get to know you by reading through your Instagram, and I thought it was really great. So,
Oh, good. That's good
John,
to know.
you're doing a fine job.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your art though. So I understand now that the landscapes or the hiking trails are done digitally. I'm assuming with Adobe Illustrator or something like that.
Yes.
So, So, but you paint as well, because like the shoes are great. I really love the painting of Mi Hunglo. I think that's
Oh,
great. It's such an iconic place in San Luis Obispo. Um, so how did that all come about for you? Did you study any kind of painting, or is this just organically self-taught that you're working? And are you using acrylics, or what medium are you using when you paint?
yeah, I paint with acrylics. When I first started, I was painting with oils. I took my first painting class in junior college, but like so many other artists, I just was filling sketch pad after sketch pad, like from the time I could hold a pencil, pretty much. That was my favorite pastime. So I took lots of art in high school, and then I got into photography, and I considered pursuing that as a career. And then, yeah, took my first painting class in junior college and just loved it. Um, but I never, I didn't pursue fine art as a degree because I didn't think it was practical. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't I didn't have, I mean, my parents were super supportive, but I don't think, or maybe it was, just that time or their generation, I'm not sure, but there was no one around me saying, you can figure out a way to monetize this career. Like if
Right.
that's what you love and that's what you're passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
you'll figure it out. I probably would have, if I had pursued fine art, I probably would have found graphic design as you know, a
Mm-hmm.
steady income, but I didn't even know that was a thing,
Mm-hmm.
as a young adult. So um, I painted very sporadically when I was at Cal Poly because the landscape architecture degree is 5 years and it's very um, time intensive. There's many hours in the studio and weekends, and it was hard to take electives. It was hard to find any room for anything else. I think I took one life drawing class that whole 5 years. Um, and then after I got married, actually, my husband encouraged me to start painting again. And so here and there, I would do things just for fun. And then after my kids were born, I started to show. Like I created a piece that I was really proud of, and um, I put that into a juried show, and then that kind of kicked things off for me. And then
What piece was that?
it's called Slot Canyon One,
Mm,
and it was also the first very large piece I did. It was 48 by 60,
wow. Yeah.
which was super intimidating. It took months and months
This
for
will
me.
be my first painting. Let me do this huge painting.
Well, I'd never painted anything that large, and it was just so intimidating. But um, it was accepted into the show, and I even placed. So it kind of gave me a little, enough encouragement to keep doing it.
So
So
when did you take like the leap and say, I'm going to pursue this 100%? What,
uh, it was a year in uh, February. So it's only been like a year and a half.
mm,
So I still feel really, as in terms of my painting career, I kind of feel like I'm at the beginning in a lot of ways,
yeah.
because all of the painting I've done leading up to this has really been in like fits and starts,
Mm-hmm.
you know, an hour here and there in between a job and kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the moment I'm ready to really dive in and kind of figure out what's next for me there.
Yeah, I really, I think this is kind of interesting that you posted back in January your 2020 goals, and the first one being meet people in person and delete video conferencing. Is that foretelling or something? I don't know. But we haven't talked about your murals, but you said to do 3 murals. But I want to talk about, you said to create a series of paintings that you were proud of. So has that series been simmering? Is it ready to come to fruition? Is it something that you're working on?
It's something I'm thinking about working on.
That's how it starts.
So I feel like over the years, every time I've put a paintbrush to a canvas, it's for a show or it's for a commission. I haven't had this, these long chunks of time to just play and paint and experiment and make terrible things. Um, and that's what I'm starting to do now. And I don't really know like what the next series will be, but I feel like I have to find it by, just diving in without really something specific in mind, just because I want to take a different approach than I always have in the past.
Yeah.
I haven't had the luxury of screwing up because I commit to do a solo show and I've got, 5 months to create a body of work. Like everything's got to be presentable.
How did you go about getting shows so quickly? Where did you do a solo show?
I've done 2 at Linnea's over the years, and I did one at Haven Properties that used to be on Monterey Street, and then participated in a bunch of group shows, just locally. I mean, I feel like there's always more opportunities than I have time to be involved with. So yeah, I mean, just art after dark kind of projects. But yeah, I'm excited to see what comes next, and I'm not really sure what that is. But
well, that's kind of the most exciting thing, to give yourself some time and space to just play and get to it. It'll come. The inspiration will hit you.
That's what I feel like too.
Okay, let's talk about murals, because I just painted my fireplace, which was like
so cool.
And 3 other walls. It was a major undertaking, and I just finished also a really huge painting, and I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to do that again, because it's so physical. It's literally so physical. Getting up the ladder, getting off the ladder, get up the ladder. Oh, I forgot the paint. Get back up on the ladder.
Yes, I agree.
But you did a beautiful mural up in Paso. How did they find you for that? It was a wine. What? Maybe you can tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's called the Paso Market Walk, and it just opened on Saturday. It's a collection of I think there's several buildings that are kind of all connected, and it's full of different vendors. So there's olive oil and gelato and a bunch of restaurateurs, and then a beautiful outdoor area with outdoor seating and lawn games. And then I think there are 4 or 6 Airbnbs as well on the second floor. And it's a really beautiful kind of modern Scandinavian looking building. And so one of the vendors is the Paso Robles wine merchant, and it's a husband and wife run business. And I met the wife, Julie, in a business class that I was taking last year. And we just kind of started chatting, and so that's how we connected. And it was, I think we talked about it for a year before we finally did it. But yeah, that's how that one came about. And
it's beautiful. It's so pretty. Yeah, I really love it. So did they kind of let you just run with it? They're like, well, we have this space, and did they say these are the colors? Or like, how did that work come about for you? Actually, did you have to show sketches, and did you present different ideas to them? Did it evolve, or did they say, yep, that's it, just do whatever you want?
Yeah, murals are, I mean, I'm by no means an experienced muralist, but I am finding that murals are kind of this combination of fine art and work for a client. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where a muralist gets to just do whatever they want, but In this case, it was very much a collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on the architectural style and the interior finishes in the building, I chose a line drawing, kind of continuous line drawing style, because I felt like space um, kind of called for something a bit minimalist
Mm-hmm.
and elegant. It's
Mm-hmm.
very white and bright, and there's um, quartz countertops and warm woods, concrete floor, that kind of thing. So that's I presented that as my initial idea to them, and they liked it. And then I did a few sketches, and we went back and forth tweaking a few little things, but they were a great client because all along they said, well, we really want it to be your voice and your style. So even when they would give me suggestions or say we saw something we liked, they would continuously stress that we don't want you to move away from your style
Mm-hmm.
and your approach.
Yeah.
So yeah, it went really well, and they were fun to work with.
So do you feel like you want to do more of the murals, or is that something that
I
is
do, yeah, for sure. I've actually teamed up with a couple other artists, and we're actively proposing on murals at the moment and trying to get kind of a little mural business going.
very cool?
Yeah.
One of those people might be Neil.
Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. Um, I also, because I live in Arroyo Grande where we have roosters everywhere, I love your, I love that your social distancing rooster. And I don't know who did this graphic, but someone did a graphic with the rooster with the mask on, which I thought was
Oh, that's funny.
quite cute and clever. But you mentioned in your bio that you are obsessed with the mundane, which um, I would imagine that's like I really like your paintings of like the shoes and the tractors, and they're like these moments that you're kind of capturing. Is that the elaborate about you're obsessed with the mundane?
Yeah, I think it came from being a parent, honestly. Um, I think after my son was born, I just started to look at the world a little differently. I remember this moment, being outside with him, and a bird flew by overhead, and he immediately saw it and followed it across the sky. And it kind of occurred to me, like, how many times have I been standing outside and paid no attention
Mm,
to a bird flying by, and how many birds flew
mhm,
by without me even noticing. You just, kids like see the world like in such detail, and
mhm,
everything's so interesting to them, and you can tell they're always um, really examining textures and colors and light. And yeah, I think that was a big shift for me. I just started to appreciate the small moments that were around me, um, and painting that way.
mhm.
And then it evolved more um, as the kids got older. And when you're knee deep in like diapers and naps and it's just the chaos of babies and toddlers, you can certainly just get caught up in the day to day and feel overwhelmed. And um, painting this way kind of reminded me to slow down and
Mm,
really examine these little vignettes that were just in my little world, in my little
mhm,
bubble, but that actually some really simple everyday things are quite beautiful.
mm. Mm, I really like that. I remember one of my art teachers had said, was talking about negative space, like looking at things, looking at the negative space, not looking at the object. And it reminded me of like just being a kid laying on my back, looking up the leaves at a tree and seeing the spaces in between the leaves. And I've always loved that, even as an adult. I still love to look up at the trees and look at the negative space. But it is, those really just leaves like in a tree. but it was a kid thing, you know, how many times you just sitting out in the backyard, just like looking up at the tree. I was,
Right. You don't need a whole lot to entertain you, and you just notice like the little things. I think you have more time when you're
yeah.
young to sort of appreciate those things.
Well, I kind of wonder if that's happening now, you know, with us all being more home based and, you know, having to have this. I mean, I know a lot of people are saving a lot of time because they're not commuting back and
Yeah.
forth, you know, saving like actually a couple hours a day, not having to get in the LA traffic. And so it it does seem like a interesting time, introspective time to go back to just noticing those simple things around our home.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on something else that kind of motivates me in my work, and that is that we're really, every time we look at our phones or turn the news on, I mean, we're just bombarded with
Mm-hmm.
negative information.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I personally can only take in so much before it really affects me.
Oh,
And
me too.
yeah, it's heavy, and I carry it around with me.
Right.
And I mean, for me, when I'm creating my work, it takes me out of that space, and
Mm-hmm.
in those moments when you feel kind of helpless, about the state of the world, it does feel good to just focus on, what's in front of me and what's beautiful about what I'm looking at. And that's what I hope people get from my work, so that when they walk into their living room at the end of the day, there's just this simple, joyful image,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe brings you a little calm and a little peace. I mean,
Yeah, a little reprieve from what's
yeah.
going on in the world. I am with you 100,000%. That's the whole purpose behind what I paint too. Um, wow. Okay, so let me see if I got everything. The last thing I want to ask you about is your fabulous new studio, but then I dug deep and this sounds really bad. It sounds like I was stalking you, but
No, no, it's fine.
I read that you
Public.
about about your studio that it was actually built a while ago and then you move it to the house that you're at now?
Yeah, we did. We we've been at the house we're in now for about 3 years, and it's the first home we purchased. So we rented a house in town for about 14 years, and during the recession, we actually built the studio because I didn't know if I was going to have a job. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean, that's another story about how it all came together. But um, we didn't put it on a permanent foundation because the landlord didn't want us to. But he wanted
Mm.
us to be able to remove it if we needed to when we left. And then when we did, it wasn't even a question. It's like my third child. She had to come with us.
Well, I like you just got a new coat of paint. It's all
Exactly.
look
Yeah.
ready, white walls, ready for some artwork. I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. My
is that where you work every day? Is that where you go paint?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I have a desk and computer set up. So if I'm packaging up prints or doing graphic design work, painting, it's all happening in here.
It's really nice too. I think a lot of people with this stay at home and working at home to have a dedicated space for your work because it's so easy for the work and the home life to intertwine, and then it just feels like you're not able to turn anything off. So it is nice to have that separate space. You can shut the door and kind of have an office hour, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I feel really lucky, and I'm appreciating it even more now because my husband was working from home for, I can't remember how long it was, maybe a couple of months, and he was sharing the space with me.
you're like, this is
um,
my space.
um, and I didn't realize he shouts when he's on the phone. And I mean, he was on Zoom calls or phone calls almost all day long.
Oh, wow.
So it was, yeah, I hadn't appreciated, that when as much, that when I walk in here, I have the solitude and there's no interruptions. And, now that he's back at the office, as soon as he left, I did the paint job and kind of.
Oh, I see.
It's fun.
I'm claiming I'm taking the space back.
Yeah. But I know a lot of people don't have a dedicated space, and I feel super lucky. And we just, we had some friends help us for a whole weekend when we started building this thing. And then my husband and I chipped away at it for like a year. So it was a labor of love. And as soon as I walk in the door every day, it just kind of, it's like a big sigh of relief. It just feels good in here.
Okay, now I'm really motivated to like clean out my studio. My studio's in my attic, so it has so much stuff in here though. It's crazy. My poor husband, because I like just bring my work all over the house. Wherever the temperature is the right place or the light is the right, I kind of move my work all over the place. He's like, oh God, can we just have one room? Just have paintings everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, this is just so lovely. I really am so excited for you. Just launching. I know your art crew is just going to be super successful because your work's gorgeous. So it's great. It has just a lot of wonderful meaning behind it, and I'm sure that people will really pick up on the good vibrations that are going into all of the pieces that you're creating. But I do want to ask you about your words of advice to your younger self, and if you could just share about being creative in business, and what that helpful advice would have been if somebody would have shared that with you when you were younger.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, when was this? Maybe it was right before I started building the studio. Actually, I was at work one day and, just small talking with a colleague who sat next to me. And, he just said, what'd you do over the weekend kind of thing. And I think we had just started, and I told him I was building an art studio. And he made some comment, which really surprised me because, he was quite a creative person and always had seemed to support that I was doing art on the side. And he made some comment about, oh, you want to be an artist, but you don't like eating? Or something along those lines, something that sort of implied.
Like implying that you're going to starve if you're an artist?
Yes, that there's no way to be, to support yourself as an artist. And I never forgot that. Obviously it's as old as time itself, that whole philosophy. So it's not that I hadn't heard that before, but it really stuck with me because it was someone I knew, and knew me. And I think if I were to give myself advice as a younger person, it would be that you just have to be creative about how you approach it. And you have to think about it as a business. Because I think, one thing I'm grateful for in terms of the career that I had for the first 19 years is that helped me figure out how to write contracts and, write scopes and put fees together and, present alternatives. And, the business side of doing creative work for people is super important. And having that skill, is critical. I think a lot of times artists aren't considered very professional, maybe because they don't come from a professional background, and so they don't know how to sit down with maybe the owner of a company and talk to them about creating paintings for their space and what they can expect and what the timeline is, and how the fees work. That professional part of it is really important. And then thinking in terms of all different avenues that you can use your creativity to put food on your table.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if it were up to me, I would just paint full time. But I know that realistically, especially in this county, I can't sell enough paintings to send my kids to college, for example. Um, so I have to balance that out, and have my eggs in several baskets. So that's why I also have the graphic design work, and that's why I'm pursuing the mural work. And last year, a big portion of my income came from doing makers markets.
Oh, I forgot to ask you about that. I was going to ask you how that experience was. So that was good for you.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, the community of other makers is awesome, especially when you're an artist and you spend a lot of time alone. It
Mm-hmm.
feels really good to be out selling your work amongst other people who you respect and admire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and between all of those things, I think looking at your art business in this sort of multi-tiered way can really mean that you can make a living doing it. You have to think outside of, I'm going to make some art and I'm going to sell it, and it may not be exactly the way you want it to go, but in the end, you're doing creative work. You're working for yourself. You're deciding the work you're going to make, and if you can bring in money too, then you're kind of getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and being creative, I mean, every business needs creative, needs a creative, just like you learned at the landscaping business, you were doing the graphics there. And I think as the world becomes more visual with platforms like Instagram and Pinterest, you're going to see that the artist is really going to rise. So all of these old beliefs, really old limiting beliefs of like, oh, the starving artist and blah, 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 is really non-existent in many ways, and except for people who want to still believe it, because there's licensing, there's surface design, there's so many products you can now easily put your images on and make a profit from that. And or you can really pursue the fine art channel and go down that path. There's just so many different avenues to get there. And I I'm I hope that people who hear what you just said, I'm so glad that that didn't put a stop to you pursuing, your passion, because one, the world really needs art right now. Two,
Yeah.
cultures are defined by art. I mean, go back thousands of years and you're always going to see the artwork that's really talking about what's happening in the society at that moment. It's so critical to our evolution to have art in it. And I think even now with people being home and they're looking at their interior spaces going, wow, maybe I could make this space look a little better.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and art does that. Art can be an instant um, change to an interior space that makes it from something mundane to something really beautiful. So I'm really glad. That's really excellent advice, and I think it's a great thing to share. I mean, I grew up with that as well, like being told, don't pursue that. You're not going to make a living at that. But there were so many ways to do it, and I have a daughter who's a graphic designer, and um, she's working. There's so much work that can be come from being an
Yeah.
artist. So it is no longer that. Okay, people listening to this.
Right. Well, I think you're a great example of that too. It sounds like, with your multiple sort of creative careers. I feel like many artists are kind of like me with I call it creative ADD.
Yeah.
where it's very hard to just get into one creative outlet and only stay there.
True. It's true.
Um, if
Yeah.
if if that's the way you're inclined, then really what you realize is you can expand your skills into these other areas. And I think you mentioned, like, yeah, wallpaper design and fabric design, and I mean it's really endless, especially when you have an open mind about it,
Right.
and
Right.
can kind of look at things that way, like, oh, there might be this opportunity, and you kind of never know. It's like with any other business, when you are engaged with people and you're putting yourself out in your local business world, you never know what will sort of evolve from one thing to another.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think whatever you're really giving your energy to is going to expand and do well for you. If you're excited about it, everybody else is going to be excited about it. And I almost feel like the opposite is true in some ways, where there's so many opportunities. It is the ADD, like, what am I going to focus on? I mean, I'm
Yep.
even experiencing it now. Like, what product am I going to be putting out for holiday? Because there's just so many options of what it could be and so I don't know, just narrowing down into that, like what can it be that makes you really excited to pursue. uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and also really great advice, Amy, about the business aspect of it. And then again, another limiting belief that's not true. There's all the artists that I've spoken with and that I know are excellent business people and know how to do their taxes and know how to do all those things. I mean, maybe it's not something that nobody enjoys doing it. I don't care what business you're in,
Right.
unless you're a tax accountant, I guess. But that too, I mean, it's there's this weird idea that I think this is an old idea that artists are just frou-frou-y and they don't know how to do business, when that's I have not encountered that. This
Yeah. Yeah.
every artist I've met is excellent at business. So
Yeah, and I think, if young people are listening to this and don't even know where to begin with that, I mean, there were certainly things I didn't know either, but there's also great local resources for starting businesses in this
mhm.
town and in
Right,
this
there's
community.
Score, there's also like Skillshare online. Like there's so many things that you can go online and take a class about and learn how to do. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a different time, thankfully.
For sure. Yeah, I'm kind of envious of younger people actually because I feel like they really can do whatever they want and their
Right,
resources are so much more easily
right,
available.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's now it exists. So everything that you want to do, you can do it. It's the creativity. You just have to show up and be a creative. That's the tricky part. So if you are creative and you want to be the artist, then all those tools are there for you to go make the money or to make the product or um, to do the mural. But you have to ultimately be the artist and work on your craft every day.
Right, right.
Good
Yeah,
stuff. Thank you, Amy. Thank you
yeah,
so
thank
much.
you. It was
What-
fun chatting.
Yeah, this was really, really fun. I'm so excited to show and share your artwork for August. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yay, we're done.
Okay. Thank you, Mari.